So just about ready to get kicked off. Nearly there, penultimate. Are we the penultimate bit of the conference? It's always a good slot. So I'm Colan Mehaffey. I am a board member for Culture Republic. I'm in here today with Ashley Smith-Hammond from Culture Republic, and we're going to chat to you about audience insights, tools and trends and audience insights. Just before we get started, I've got a clicker and a microphone. And as anyone who knows an Irish person knows, this could be a challenge, okay? So I'm not a two-handed speaker, so I'll try and keep up. But one of the things that we're going to do is have a look at audience journeys really more than anything else. So what we want to do with you this afternoon is look at the latest trends, the techniques that would help you to design personas, that would help you to create user stories, that will help you ultimately to start to create meaningful user journeys, which ultimately leads to people using your services much more often. So just to give you a bit of background, I've worked in digital for more than a decade in different sectors, public, private, commercial sector. And in that time, I've seen a massive shift. 12 years, you see a big shift in things, and there's no right or wrong answer. One of the big things I'm going to say today, and that we'll bring home to you, will be the fact that although we work in a very particular sector, you guys work in a very particular sector, I work across a number of sectors. And don't just look at your neighbour. Don't just look at the person next door when you're looking for ideas or for inspiration. Look up and look around you. And that's one of the things we really want to get home today. We're going to furnish you with examples from cinema, but look around you. So Ashley, do you want to give the guys a bit of a background on yourself?
Sure. So I've worked for Culture Republic about 6 years. Before that, I did a PhD in Scottish cultural policy post-evolution, so if anybody wants to have a really nerdy conversation with me afterwards, I'm entirely up for it. Well, I started at Culture Republic running the Ambition Scotland program, which some of you might know, so digging really deep around digital trends and technologies and using digital to engage audiences. So I've been having a lot of thoughts and working on this stuff for a while as well. Yeah.
Good. Actually, do you want to explain to the guys about Culture Republic, about what we do?
Absolutely. So I've got some slides, some we made earlier. So Culture Republic is an audience engagement agency. Some of you might know, if you're from the UK, you might know the audience agency down south. So we're essentially the Scottish version of that. We have been around about 10 years, and we are experts in Scottish audiences, so current audiences as well as the Scottish market, so potential arts audiences. We have a couple of unique data sets that we use to inform how we know this stuff that we know. This is just telling you a little bit about a data set around box office returns. And we won't go too deeply in the weeds on this, but basically on the slide you can see that there's 2.4 million households in Scotland, and our transactional data covers about 1.2 million households. So, roughly half. So it's a really good representation of arts-going audiences in Scotland. It draws on about 33 arts organizations from across the country. So we gather audience insight, and we profile visual arts audiences as well, because often those aren't ticketed. And then the other unique data set that we have, and that we're going to talk about a little bit more today, is metrics on online audiences across Scotland and looking at some UK. So you can see the numbers of we're looking at Facebook, we're looking at Twitter, we're looking at Instagram and Google Analytics. And it's made up really of relevant arts organizations, mostly Scottish, but some widely across the UK. And what it does, it provides a benchmark for the folk that we work with, and when we want to talk intelligently and thoughtfully about arts audiences and how they engage online with each other and with the work that you guys are programming and putting on, then we would look to this tool to tell us something useful. Oh, and it's called Sheldon, because it's named after the nerdy guy in The Big Bang Theory. So if I start talking about Sheldon, that's what we're talking about.
Cool, thanks Ashley. So we're just going to get started and talk about personas. Can I do a quick show of hands? Who is familiar with the concept of personas around the room? Cool. In your organizations, how many of you would say you use personas actively? Okay. So it's a good representation. When we are looking at user journeys and customer journeys, developing personas is a really neat way to get into the minds of people a little bit. There's lots of different techniques and lots of different tools. There's two pieces of advice that we would certainly give you. Is in your organizations, it doesn't matter if there's a person who's cleaning the toilet or the chief exec. If you want to design really meaningful user journeys and start to design campaigns around them, include everyone, be inclusive. And think about using workshops. So the sort of workshops that commonly get used are design studios or rapid design workshops. There's all sort of fancy names for them, but really what you're looking for is to get people involved and get them actively thinking about the people that they serve. And I know that you had a session on service design yesterday, and that's a really, really critical way of thinking too, and personas form part of that. What I want to do with you today is to look at some of the different tools and techniques you might want to use to think about pulling personas together. Because if you're going to run a workshop, you might want to start with a product and what you want to sell or some objectives. And ultimately, you need to sell them to someone. You need someone to buy into it. And sometimes during this presentation, I'm going to talk about profit and consumer and things like that. And that's partly because I work across industries, but it's also because don't be ashamed of thinking in those terms. I've done loads of work in the third sector, and sometimes we feel a little bit ashamed or we step back from it, but do think about these things. So just going around some of these tools, you'll all be familiar with Google Analytics. When we're profiling audiences, this gives us the 101, the data from our web services that we need to build up some good basic demographics. But equally, there are tools like the Gartner tool, and we can share these with you afterwards, which looks at hype cycles, how people might use technology or devices for a longer term. So if you're designing something that's going to be used a year or 2 years down the line, what might people be doing? Wolfram Alpha uses a very fancy term, computational search, where it does lots of relational search for you. It's a good thing, good fun to play on. Look at relationships around different cultural sectors and cultural spheres. And I'll just show you an example from Forrester. So Forrester's a big consultancy firm, but they produce free tools to try and get you to buy their services. And one of them is their technographics tool. So in here, this is a free tool I popped onto. And if you see here, I just used the UK to have a look at mobile users in the UK and their habits. So we look at the Android and the Apple breakdown, and you can even find out a little bit more about the demographic, the age of people who are using those tools, or using their phone for different things. So here, accessing social networking sites. The more we can design personas which aren't based on fiction, which aren't based on assumptions, which aren't based on what I think, then the better we're going to get at delivering messages. And it's a really important thing to try and garner that together. So as an example for today, I thought, well, let's use one of those tools to try and come up with a persona. And I thought we could create the persona of a fanboy. So YouGov's Profiler is a tool. YouGov do thousands of surveys every year, and they have a free tool which is a profiler. And obviously they give you the free version to lure you into the big version, but the free version is actually very good. I thought, well, if I was targeting a campaign at someone who was a bit of a sci-fi buff, a little bit older, that sort of fanboy thing, what would be the term I would use? And all you need to do, try it yourself, pop into the YouGov Profiler, and I popped in Star Wars. And I got some results. So you see here, you start to see a persona develop. And some of this is pretty nailed on, and some of it is absolute guesswork, because apparently most Star Wars fans live in the northeast of England. And this is based on a sample of 10,000 people. So it's not an insignificant sample, but it also starts to bring up things like their politics, the fact that they're left-leaning, and you think, well, what interest could that be of me? But you're just starting to build a picture, a profile of someone. So you get your basics, and then you can go into some wider detail like personality. So here you'll see someone who probably considers themselves pretty switched on, pretty smart, but by the same score, they appreciate toilet humor, bizarrely. So this is run across 10,000 people, and across that data set, these are recurrent themes that they see. So as much as you might think, well, this can't be true, it can't be accurate, it's a bit of fun, yes, but equally, it can give you a little bit of insight as to how people are and how they behave. So we have equally the obvious, so it also can develop for you what sort of social networking follows they have. So in this case, a Star Wars fan also follows Star Trek and Doctor Who. It's not a big stretch, is it? But there's also some really alarming results that come up. So when we look at the media, there's some uncomfortable truths in here. So apparently Star Wars fans are also big fans of Taylor Swift, which surprised me. But even more alarming, We now know who to blame for Donald Trump being elected in. So these are just media habits that have been aggregated, anonymously aggregated, and they can throw that picture up. So strangely, as we all know, everything we do online is subsumed into a great big knowledge engine, and this is just one of those engines. So does everyone get a sense of that? Useful tool, bit of fun. If you were running a workshop, if you're trying to design something, it's a lot of fun to do this kind of thing with people. They can enjoy it, and it gives you something to work towards. So the next bit I want to talk about are user stories. So to give you a sense of what a user story is, they came around as a result of software development of all things. And the agile methodology of software development, some of you might have heard of this. So in the agile methodology, user stories replaced functions. So as opposed to writing a requirement or a function, you wrote out a user story. And the primary reason for that was that it encouraged debate around the table. And it exposes three things about users, or about the people you might be targeting. You're trying to get to the bottom of, one, who they are, or a facet of their personality. Given that everything's contextual, okay? So a facet of their personality. The second bit is what they want to do, and the third bit, which is the critical bit, is why they want to do it. And that's what we miss out very, very often. Because we just think, I want someone to buy a ticket, therefore they should buy a ticket. Well, not necessarily. So when you start to build these up, what you can end up with is a really convincing situation where you start to build up stories that you can map out, and they can help you design campaigns.
Can I jump in there, too?
Yeah.
Because I think that one of the things that's really helpful, especially around these user stories, and we've certainly seen them be helpful, is that when you go into a situation where you're designing a marketing campaign or redesigning your website or whatever you happen to be doing a bit of service design, thinking about your pain points, you think about what you want people to do, and you know your organization and your product so well that there's a lot of stuff that's obvious to you. And a tool like this forces you to get out of your own head about the things that you already know and think about the motivations of the people that you actually want to come along and participate with whatever you have to offer from your organization. And so it's just a good way of making that person a little bit real to you and think about what that person wants to do, and we'll work with this idea a lot more as we go.
What I love about this, we don't really have the time to do it today, but in different sessions that we run, we would actually get people to break out and write some user stories based on their audiences. This is a 2-minute exercise. There is nothing here today that you can't take away and do immediately. It's a really important thing. So it might seem a bit foreign, might seem a bit of a stretch, it might seem a bit marketing-y, it might seem not right, but there's nothing here that you can't just take away and do. And that's a really important aspect of some of the things we're passing on. So if we were to do a quick exercise on a user story, as an example, as a Star Wars fan, I might want to vote for Donald Trump. Based on the research we've done, that's what we've got. But ultimately, what is the objective? Well, the objective is they want to make sure the Death Star becomes a reality. Or a giant space wall, some such thing, I don't know. But the point is, do you see the logic there? Facet of the person, right down to that kind of, here's what I want to do, but why I want to do it is really important. And that can really help you to design it. And when you think about some of the campaigns, when you come across some of the things that inspired you to go and do things, why did you come here today? As an attendee of This Way Up 2016, I want to sow that. Really nice, really easy technique. Is that okay for everyone? Do you get that? Mm-hmm. Great. Cool.
But you have to imagine why.
You do.
So you're filling in the gap.
In a way, Morven, it's a really good question, because to my mind, there's a mixture of the stuff, the profiling, the persona stuff, and all of the bits of information you can gather will feed into that. Because, like the example we gave you, as ridiculous as it was sort of based in a piece of fact. Yeah? So don't just do it completely fictionally. And there are techniques. One of them is empathy mapping, which is interesting. You'll find a free template for it online, which is one of those ones where you would do that, where you try and put yourself in someone's position and imagine what kind of things get in the way in their day. But what I would say is that all of these techniques, you have to align them with reality. So perhaps Donald Trump building the Death Star wasn't the best example, but we're there or thereabouts.
There's still an assumption to make, isn't there? Because we don't know that they're looking at Donald Trump because they don't like Donald Trump. You see what I mean? So
We don't, absolutely, yeah.
No.
And there's none of this that is tied down to the point of, if you imagine any campaign that you're doing or anything that you're designing, you're trying to get to a point of assumption. Now you can user test that. User research is actually a really critical and valuable tool, but you try and find user research at a reasonable rate, or try and find the time in your business as usual day to do that. It's pretty difficult. You've got the test. So one of the things, I would encourage people to look at Agile as a methodology to doing things, because it encourages you to do things quickly and iterate them. Do them again and again and again until you get them right. Now that's a problem when we're in time-restricted organizations and we have business as usual, yeah? So alongside that, what this also does, it starts discussion. You need to get people around the room and other people in your organization to be user or audience focused, and this is a good way to do it. Is that okay?
Yeah, so, and I would just jump in because I think that maybe it was sounding a little bit like we were saying, make it up, but the whole point about using these kinds of data sets is that you're not making it up. You're gonna draw on the data that you have access to tell you about how actually real people are. And the thing about the Trump thing is that it's an unexpected correlation, and we'll get into some real examples. Yeah. But because you couldn't make that up necessarily.
Yeah. But out of 10,000 people that YouGov have interviewed, somehow there was a correlation between Star Wars and New Hope, by the way, that particular film, that's how precise it was, and Donald Trump. And I mean, that's a strange thing, but there must be enough of that sample, because when you looked, actually, just to pop back up very quickly, when we looked at the other things that got rated above, Monty Python, David Attenborough, these are things that you would say, that's not a massive stretch. So there's something there. But with data tools, you always have to be careful and be contextual and know where you're getting it from. Yeah? So we're just going to move on. We'll go look at first of the kind of audience trends. So if we've started to build personas, if we start to build user stories, we can start to build journeys for people. And I'll put a health warning around some of the language I'm going to use. It's going to veer into very marketing speak, but the sentiment of it very much holds true, and it's all based on theories that have been developed around consultancy. Moments of truth, really interesting concept, because moments of truth have been developed and catalogued in a marketing sense for decades. So moments of truth aren't a new concept. And what's a moment of truth? Well, it's a really simple thing, all right? So when we will get a stimulus. I will look at a poster. I will see a poster for a movie. I will see an advert on the TV, or I will open up a magazine and see something. There's always been stimulus. And how digital disruption, and this is very, very obvious, has changed that is interrupting that chain. So traditionally, I saw a stimulus, and then I had what was called the first moment of truth, okay? Don't get hung up on the term, get hung up on the process. So the first moment of truth was going and ban something. Stimulus, buy something, and then you went and did it. That was dead easy. So what happened when we had digital disruption, especially in the last 8 years, and this has been catalogued since 2011 based on analytics, developed by Google themselves based on that massive data set that they've gathered. Well, we still had the stimulus. That was obvious. And in fact, have we got time actually to try a quick experiment?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, has everyone got their phones with them? You logged into Wi-Fi? Yeah? Okay, what I want you to do, so this is great. This is a bit where it all goes wrong, by the way, but, okay.
It's all right, we gotta keep it exciting.
Yeah. So, open up your browser on your phone, and when I was walking into GFT, I caught a glimpse of the movie Patterson. And I was a big Jim Jarmusch fan when I was younger, but I haven't seen his movies for years. And I thought, cool, what do I do? So I want you to Google Patterson, P-A-T-E-R-S-O-N. I want you to run that on your phone and look at your results. Okay? So search term Patterson, put that in. So can anyone shout out for me what the top result is?
Eviction of the Patterson brothers proves law of land gives too much power to the rich.
That doesn't sound like a movie. Second result?
Adam Driver's Patterson will be treasured for years, reviewed by the Telegraph.
There you go. So that's what's called the zero moment of truth. So what has changed so dramatically? It would have been from the stimulus to straight over to buy something. Now it wasn't that simple. We know that. You would talk with people, you discuss. But digital has severely disrupted how that works. So if I'm quite sure the guys who designed the campaigns and the web campaign for the movie Patterson thought about online, and they thought about all these things. They didn't think about a minor agricultural dispute that would outrank them on Google on a given day. And this happens, there's two areas you want to focus your energies here: search and social search. They're the two, and we'll talk about those in a bit, okay? But that's the point at which you get digital disruption, and it's very obvious, but if you're mapping a user journey, you've got to think about that. You've got to think about where that happens. So let's say I'm happy that I found the movie Patterson. If you scroll down, you'll actually see the local listings, etc. And I can go and buy it. And then I go and enjoy it. And then I do what Google define as the ultimate moment of truth. I tell people about it. I share it. And what this does, it creates an almost virtuous circle of data, where the data that I generate on social search or on social postings will actually influence search, and it also influences the next person to experience that product. So if you imagine from the point of view of anything that any of your campaigns are planning, anything you're doing, if you can follow that journey, broadly speaking, it can be exceptionally helpful. So it's not brain surgery, this is just a way to map out what you're doing.
Okay, so I'm going to take over now, because understanding that this stuff can be maybe a bit theoretical. As we're going through a few of these trends, we're just going to put some actual examples in front of you so that you can start to see how they work in the real world. So what we wanted to do to get an idea of what some of the moments of truth, the ultimate moments of truth around sharing behaviors would be, recall our friend Sheldon. That's the database of all of the tweets and the Facebook posts and the Instagram posts. So I just queried Sheldon. I asked it, in the last 6 months, looking for high levels of engagement with Scottish arts organizations that have a film focus specifically, what's getting the strongest engagement? Just got the top 6 tweets, top 6 Facebook posts across 10 organizations, organizations like the GFT and the Glasgow Film Festival, Edinburgh Film Festival, Screen Machine, Film Hub Scotland, Belmont, places like that. So in practice, what we have here is a zero moment of truth, right? So the Edinburgh Film Festival recently hosted Ewan McGregor for his American Pastoral debut, and he was going to come along in person. So people did some social discovery. Now this tweet is fine. Like, it had a moderate level of engagement, but it was part of a whole campaign, obviously, of letting people know that Ewan McGregor was coming. And so what happens was, when we hit the second moment of truth and the experience, you can see here the retweets and the likes are very, very high. And so it's a great example, because what they're doing is they are making the most of really exceptional content when they have it. They're building a campaign around it. They're building up to it. This tweet was, in fact, one of the top 6 tweets in the last 6 months in this group. It performed about 20 times better than the average tweet that they would have. And then what happens is then we end up with an ultimate moment of truth. This is just one example. There was obviously hundreds, but great night from Susan Lowndes. She said it was very powerful and poignant. And obviously, so she's engaging with it. She's having an experience. She's telling that experience to all of her community of followers. And then that becomes a zero moment of truth for somebody else to find out about the festival, to find out about the film. So it just, you can see that cycle now happening in a kind of very real world example. I'll give you one more very, very quickly, because I love this one. This is from the Robert Burns Center Film Theater, which in their words is Dumfries Small and Friendly Cinema. So it's in Dumfries and Galloway, which is south of here. We don't have anybody from the cinema, do we? Because we thought that would be really great if we did. No, that's fine.
He was here.
Oh, was he? Was he? Oh, what a shame. Well, so this was by far, obviously it's a very small cinema. They're working with a local community on a small scale. They'll be programming locally. But this post was by far their standout post. And it was competing on a scale, you know, the Odeon cinema was in that mix, and certainly much larger players and more urban players. But because this standout post, it's right on brand, it's local, it's an exceptional event, and it becomes a zero moment of truth for significant numbers of people in their online audience. Their online audience is about 2,000 followers. So in terms of just the number of likes and comments that we've got there, that makes up, because most of the comments you'll see are actually shares, because it's just tagging people by their, as you know, like people do on Facebook, so you put their name on there and then it drives them to that post. So that's about 10% of their total Facebook audience took some action and engaged with this post because of that. So that's a really strong representation of those moment of truth and that moment of action, and them making the most of something which was exceptional in their community. I'm going to hand back to Colin now.
So again, with the moments of truth, it's worth have a look at it. Obviously, Google being Google, have set up a massive resource about it and have lots of great examples of how it can be put into practice. So although it seems a bit theoretical and a bit removed and all the rest of it, it is a really good thing to go and have a look at and study. Like all of these things, it's all contextual, like I say, but the thing we're going to have a look at now are micro moments. So, micro moments. Okay, I'm doing a three-handed thing, I'm almost a juggler now. So that every time you pull this device out, it's described as a micro moment. So Forrester have a lot of really great research on this, as do Google. And they've studied, using data and analytics, the intent, tried to classify intent. So I don't pull my phone out for the good of my health. I pull it out with an intention to do something. So when they looked at it, when they studied it, they've broken it down into 4 areas, which, again, if you're designing things to do, it's good to think about what actions you want people to take. It's good to think about at their journey, what point you want to do things. And they say that those 4 things are, unsurprisingly, to buy, and more so these days. So transaction on mobiles is, if you look at the statistics, it shifts through the roof. And the trend is going to flatten off in the next 2 years, because transactionally we're hitting a good peak point where they reckon the mix won't change that much without a big change in technology or devices. People want to know things, it's obvious. You want to do things, or you want to go somewhere. So Google Maps, really interesting. I don't know what engagement you guys have with Google Maps, but look at it and look at the range of free products they have for not-for-profits, because it's terrific. So it's those kind of 4 features that you can break down most actions into. So again, if you were in a situation where you're trying to work out what you want people to do, let's take an example, commuter time. Let's say you're running a Google Ads campaign or a Facebook Ads campaign at commuter time. You've got to try and work out what you want people to do, and you've got to make sure you deliver it in the right format and the right device, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, these are very, very simple things, but they do help inform what we do. Buy, know, go, and do. So, as an example of this, again, if people can pop their phones out right now, you've taken your phone out with intent. So if I can ask you guys a wee favour, if you can go and just create a meta micro moment, which is the most postmodern thing you're going to hear at this conference. Okay? So we all give it a quick tweet and tag it with "this way up 16. You've created a micro moment. And that was a do micro moment. So there you go. So this is the way that we work in this day and age. It helps you to design experiences around the device that people are likely to use. And this is so ubiquitous now. And I know that sounds very obvious, but you think about the number of journeys that you have where you pick up your phone to do something and somebody hasn't thought about what you want to do. So a very common one, actually, these days is a switch between a desktop site and a mobile site, where journeys, when you map them through, they'll move between the two. And the attrition, the dropout on those journeys is huge, because people just get frustrated. If they go from a lovely, well-served film listing to a non-mobile optimized checkout, forget about it. So it's a really important thing to map those things out, actually try them in real time.
That was just enough time for me to tweet. I don't think I've ever tweeted in front of an audience before. Okay, so again, just to make this a little bit real and to show give you an example of a really, really, really data-driven marketing campaign around a film, we're going to look at The Green Inferno, which is a horror film from director Eli Roth. Are you guys aware of this film? Do we know of this? We got some yeses and some no's. Okay, this example is drawn from a piece in Wired magazine, which you could absolutely go and read. Eli Roth has a data-happy vision for cinema's future. And the fact that there's a real mix in here of some people knowing about it and some people not is entirely on purpose, and we're gonna get into that. So I'll set you up with a little bit of information just about the film. Cost $5 million to make. Eli Roth in the article reports it cost $8 million for marketing, earned $13 million at the box office, according to IMDb sources, Wikipedia, and $1 million in streaming and DVD sales. So if you do the maths, it made some money. And crucially, if the marketing had cost any more, it probably wouldn't have made any money at all. So Eli Roth's whole point in this piece was that it didn't need a major marketing campaign because it didn't need to find a wide audience. It just needed to find the right audience. So let's dig into that a little bit. There's a great quote from him, which I'm just going to read you, which is that using 20 people on a random Wednesday night as a facsimile for the entire movie viewing public seems ridiculous when you've got the entire internet at your disposal to ask instead. Which, you know, like if you can use the internet intelligently to do that job for you, then yeah, absolutely. And we're probably all really familiar with the idea that horror is very much a niche audience, right? So it's kind of Marmite. You love it or you hate it. And they're playing with the idea around, you might remember this, Mark Duplass talking at South by Southwest saying, for independent film that the cavalry aren't coming, like major studios are not coming to solve the problem of independent cinema, and that independent cinema needs to do it itself and talk about some tools of doing it itself. So using this as an example of one way of cinema makers supporting each other, but also acting really intelligently and using the tools that it has. So the marketing campaign for this film had a major marketing partner, which was an outlet called Crypt TV, which I've got a slide about in a second. But they are very active on social media across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. What they offer is micro snippets of horror content. So the film, The Green Inferno, it was distributed by Blumhouse, an offshoot of Blumhouse, which is BHTIL. It's a specialist distributor which focuses on horror. And so what they did using Crypt TV, this partnership with Crypt TV, is they created a short piece which was similar, resonated with the story of The Green Inferno, which, oh, do we know this? I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. So it's about young people from the West, from liberal arts colleges in the United States, going to do activism in the rainforest in South America, and then meeting cannibals, which obviously happens. So what they did was they created a very short piece for Crypt TV, which resonated with that kind of storyline. There was just a card at the end which would drive to the Green Inferno. They put a tracking pixel on that piece to track and profile the people that engaged with that particular piece of content, and especially the people that clicked through from that piece of content to then learn more about the Green Inferno. And so they used that to target the horror fans that engaged with the video. And so that was people, you know, in some of the profiles they came up with, it was people who liked Tarantino. Okay, that's fine, you might guess that. But it was also people that liked Gossip Girl. It was also people that liked Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift comes up again in our profiling. And this is very similar to our YouGov profiling, because you can expect this kind of research to throw up these unexpected correlations, and that's why you let the data tell you who's engaging with your work, rather than doing that, exactly what your question was, guessing at who you think your audience is. Because for instance, he was very surprised in the article, he talks about how he's surprised, like some of it was really skewing female, and he thought that it was maybe a dude thing, but clearly not. So then what he did, he cut trailers for those profiles, those groups, to then be placed on social channels, and you can micro-target those to the profiles that you want, and put their placement targeted at the personas that they'd identified so that the right people would be finding the content and then would be acting on it. And then if you think about the kind of results that they got decent box office, so he did find the right people. And the benefit is obviously you're stripping out the marketing cost to wide audiences that wouldn't be interested. According to Eli Roth in the piece, it was cut down to about a quarter of what a traditional major release would be, of even like an indie, and generate greater profits than from your box office and from your streaming and from your DVD and Blu-ray sales. This is just my quickie on Crypt TV. This is literally just a screenshot of their Facebook page, which just gives you a little bit of a flavor of what the kinds of numbers and engagement that they get. And I'm going to give you one quickie example of the kinds of things that Crypt TV do because it is really interesting. So they did a partnership with social media stars, so people who are only famous for being famous, either YouTubers or Instagrammers or whatever, people who have massive followings on those channels. In this case, it was on Snapchat. And so they did an exercise over 24 hours where they did a live event where they killed off the social media stars. So they murdered them live online. And then they delivered a Snapchat story, and a cross-channel, but it was mainly a Snapchat story where you would engage with it over the 24 hours so that fans could be following the clues and then guessing who had actually done the murder. And so that obviously creates a series of micro moments. You're picking up your phone, you're checking back in with it because you want to know, and then possibly you want to buy. So you're creating those micro moments. You're creating content that is specifically for people that you feel like you have a sense of what they like and what they're going to respond to, and give them some triggers that will be motivating for them. Okay, back to Colin.
So great. So I'm not a fan in any way, shape or form of acronyms. I kind of find them one of the most abhorrent things you can find in a workplace, but this is one that we discovered when doing research into micro moments and how they can be really well designed, and it actually works really well, surprisingly. So if you're doing this, identify your pain points, okay? Because you're making assumptions when people are using your services that everything's going fine. We talked about it before. Actually track your customer journeys right through. Do them yourself, yeah? And do them in different contexts or different situations. If you think that people are going to be doing it when they're commuting, try it out yourself when you're commuting. Design effective communication is the most simple thing in the world, but how many times do you come across things which are not mobile optimized or not targeted in the right way? I've worked commonly across the heritage sector for a long time, and one of the most difficult things is taking what very smart, intelligent people write and turn it into what's essentially tabloid-style jargon. And so that's a real gift, and it doesn't mean you have to do it every time, but being efficient is good. Engineer your organization, and this is about actually getting everyone in your organization to make sure they're focused there. They're focused on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to deliver and the devices you're trying to deliver to, yeah? Working out that their messaging and their campaigns are actually based around that. And the final point is using your analytics to hone your skills. So I think one of the things most commonly say across organizations, and we say in Culture Republic, is I put all my effort into designing a really great campaign, and we do all the study, we do all the work, and that's great, and we never do a retrospective, we never do a wash down on it. And we almost certainly don't, when we're running it, work out why it's not working as well as it should, because we're too busy. But it's about finding the time in your working life to check in and make sure that you're not just waiting until the end of the campaign and going, that worked or it didn't work. You're actually doing it throughout the whole thing. So again, abhorrent acronym apologies offered, but a nice way to design things. So we're on the home stretch, and we're going to talk about lifetime value. Quick show of hands, how many people around the room have some sort of CRM or database they use to track people? Quite a few, yeah? Okay. Lifetime value, CRM, lovely, wonderful tool, great. Working across a few CRM projects and one big one at the minute, you will find it with CRM or database tools, if you use 5% of the features, you're doing well. So Salesforce is a really good example. Tons of people use it. And I've spoken to Salesforce and they tell me that their usage of their features in the facilities is just really, really low. So have a think about their tools that you're using and actually think about what you're doing. But what I want to talk about with lifetime value is what it really means. Because lifetime value is really predicated on the notion that you're trying to work out the profit that someone is going to generate over their lifetime with you, as opposed to the revenue. So again, we focus on how much money someone brings in without thinking how much it costs us. And this is, again, I apologize for being a little bit commercial about this, but we need to be smart because that's what everyone else is doing. So when we're trying to work out the data points that we're collecting people's information from, we need to be using that to try and work out what it's costing us to service them. So if I was to give you a basic lifetime value calculation, and believe me, when you look at some of the calculations that people do on them, especially for predictive lifetime value, it's like calculus. But a basic one is, Jim visits GFT once a year and buys a ticket at £10 over 10 years, so that's £100. But what you should be factoring into that is equally what it costs to get his business to begin with, to get Jim to come along in the first place, and how much it costs you to keep him, to service him and keep him. Because that's what we rarely think about. And we talk about membership schemes and collateral and all those things we have to develop. You've got to factor those costs in, yeah? If you're thinking about lifetime value.
Right. My bit. Okay, so to bring this idea of lifetime value a little bit to life and to give you a real life example, I'm going to tell you about a piece of work that we did with a cinema. I'm going to keep that cinema anonymous, but this is a real project. And what they basically wanted to do is they wanted to look at the idea of a loyalty scheme, because you'll see as we go through, they were having some trouble making sense of knowing who their audience were. And they wanted to, well, they had three key goals. They had a lot of goals, but the ones that we winnowed it down to were increasing data capture, increasing income, and increasing attendance, which may well be resonant goals for some of you as well. And there's two kinds of schemes, roughly, that you can think about when you think about loyalty schemes. There's a kind of philanthropic type of one, which is like a friends type of scheme. And what you get from that is something like an emotional benefit. It's mission related, and the motivation is because people believe in the mission, because they believe in your organization, because they believe in what you do, and the motivation is a charitable one. They give you money. They might access some limited benefits, but if you keep it in your mind that this is a kind of emotional relationship, and that's the motivation. And then the other kind of scheme that you can think about, and that we looked at as part of this research, was a kind of loyalty scheme. And this is much more transactional. So these kinds of benefits are often things like discounts. And so the relationship that you're building with that audience member may be no less real, but the motivations are different and the expectations are different as well. So we looked across a range of different examples of membership and loyalty schemes as models to understand the different kinds of benefits of each. But remember, increasing data capture was our number one goal. And I'm just going to show you why. So this is a real graph from a box office report. And you don't have to be very data literate to kind of make sense of this very, very, very quickly. The yellow bar is the cinema. You can see that all of their business, not all of their business, more than 80% of their business was walk-up ticket sales on the day. So I would imagine this is very, very familiar to many of you, because what this creates is a long queue. And what that creates is a situation where you just need to move people through quickly and sell them a ticket quickly. And if you're going to do that, then you're not going to be gathering any data about that person. You just have to sell them the ticket, get them into the theater, get them seated, get the next person through. It's a lot of pressure on the box office because you don't want to create other kinds of pain points for your audience where they're getting really pissed off standing in line. So this is the result then. This is what happens. So the green bar was a film festival that we were using as a comparison. The data collection for the film festival, which had more advanced booking, you could see had more data collection in terms of even just a postcode. You can do a lot with a postcode to make sense of who your audiences are, to profile them. But the cinema had less than 10% of data collection. So of the hundreds of thousands of tickets they sold, 7% of those they managed to actually gather any data about the audiences that were coming along to their cinema. So, and this is a significant worry because they were struggling to target their marketing. They wanted to incentivize people to come along and try some of the more challenging programming that they were offering, which might be a similar problem that some of you have. They were trying to make the case that they were serving their community, and they couldn't prove it because they didn't know who was coming. And that's important to funders. And crucially, especially for this example, they didn't know how many people were actually coming back. And if you don't know who your repeat attenders are, and with data collection levels like this, you can't have any confidence, really, and how many people are coming back, that becomes a real problem because your repeat attenders are generating more value. And we're just going to have one more graph, I promise. I'm not going to nerd out too much. So this is a real example. This is a different box office now, again, anonymous, obviously. But I used a different one because they had much better data capture. And so here's how you make sense of this colorful bar chart. So you can see that the majority of the attendees, so 61% there in your bottom left, 61% are first-time visitors. They just came once that year. That's fine. But if you look at the rest of the bar, the 24%, what you want to make sure that you fully understand is that they made up 64% of the ticket sales and 51% of the overall revenue. And that's just for one financial year. So a quarter of the audience was making up 2/3 of the sales and 50% of the revenue. So that quarter is the most valuable quarter. That's the people. And if you think about this, this is just 1 year. So if you extrapolate this over a series, a lifetime, then it begins to really become clear that understanding who that 25% are and working to engage them and to bring them back is really, really worth your effort. And hence gathering data and understanding who they are and what motivates them is going to be really crucial to that project. So in this case, we go back to the actual example now. What the organization decided to create was a benefits-focused loyalty scheme. So, and many of us, I would imagine many of you are charities, and you could create a philanthropic friends type of scheme because it might be more appropriate to you. You might already have one, indeed, and offer those emotional benefits. But remember, if we go back to what the main goals were, increasing data capture, increasing income, and increasing attendance, a philanthropic scheme could probably increase income, but depending on the model, it probably wouldn't have increased the goal of increasing attendance or data capture. And because their data capture was so poor, they would have struggled to actually begin to identify who would be a good target for a philanthropic scheme in the first place because they didn't know very well about who was coming along to the cinema. So in this case, what they did was they devised a scheme which was a free scheme, but it offered some money off for every ticket that you would purchase. It had a series of different benefits, but because the audience would register to be a member of the scheme, then you had the data on those people, and you could very quickly and easily just scan that card, get the person in, see who's coming back, because you're falling back on the data. You have a quick way rather than a slow way that's going to build that queue up of seeing who's coming back and who your most loyal patrons are. So that was what worked for them. I'm going to hand back to Colan now.
So it's a really strong example. I mean, the key thing is that when you're looking at lifetime value, you'll get different models very, very quickly, going to whiz you through those. Historically, just looking backwards, your time-bound one, some people choose to have a beginning and an end when they're doing lifetime value models, but most of the tools you'll find online have the ability to do the really good thing, which is predictive, which takes all of the profiling data and puts that into the model for predicting how much value people can generate over a lifetime. And unfortunately, if you're going to be bothering yourselves to do lifetime value, just remember that if you're doing a revenue-based lifetime value measurement, it's not worth it. Yeah, you're not being realistic about how much it costs you to service people, and that's a really critical cost.
Oh, I was gonna just
Yeah.
in that example that we talked about. So, for instance, the kinds of things that you want to think about this. So that they first of all they needed to work with their box office system and make sure that they made a scheme that would work very quickly and efficiently and well. And then they had to be realistic about the cost of getting some of the benefits to work. So, and this may well resonate too, that they wanted to be able to offer discounts for concessions, but the concession system used a different system than the box office system, and getting those two things to work together was actually, so understanding not just what you want it to do, but sort of what it's going to take to get it to work that way, and being kind of quite proactive at the time that you're designing things, because you do need to take all of those costs into account in time and effort, as well as just the cost of the thing.
So what you should be learning from your lifetime value schemes, again, it's a bit corporate speak, but focus how you're acquiring people, focus what money you're spending to get people in through the door. If you're doing online campaigns, you can work that out. Yeah, whether that's cost per acquisition or cost per click, whatever model you use, that is not difficult, and a lot of your CRMs that you're using will be able to do it for you if you can pump the data into them. It should inform your offering. Over a lifetime, if you start to get information and profiling data over a lifetime on people, it should inform your offering. I'm not saying that it moves you away from your core purpose. If your core purpose, part of that is a specialist offering that doesn't have high attendance, that's what we got to do. But if you don't listen to your audience, it's going to be difficult. Helps you to calculate how much you're spending on servicing people. I keep talking about that, but one of the ones I came across was a loyalty scheme where they thought that the electronic collateral was going to be miles cheaper than any kind of printed collateral. As it turned out, they were spending so much money on design of e-communication and web communication that it was more expensive to do it. So don't make assumptions. And finally, it'll just make you more efficient. Anything that gives you more time to do your day job is absolutely what you need. Okay? So that's us, wrapped. In terms of getting in touch, our details are there, but obviously want to take some questions from you. If anyone's got particular questions around any of the areas we covered today, please pop a hand up. We've got someone with a mic there.
And just be sure actually to wait for a mic if you do have a question, because otherwise the folk who are watching the webcast, hello, webcast, they can't hear you. And while you're trying to formulate your question, there was something I just wanted to flag, which is if you guys are charities, there's a couple of things that we talked about today which you can get for free or for a subsidized cost. So for instance, Google offers free AdWords for charities, which you, if you are a charity, would have access to. It's pretty easy to tap into that. And it genuinely gives you about $10,000 worth of AdWords every month,
Okay.
which is huge.
That's great. Can we get any questions at all? So you've just got 3 minutes, 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Any questions from anyone? Pop a hand up. We've dumbfounded everyone.
I know. The post-lunch slot, you're all asleep.
Morvan, go for it.
I just wanted to clarify something about the zero moment of truth, because I think in the example I maybe wasn't understanding, but it kind of felt like my moment of truth on my phone was that my phone didn't know what I was talking about and I didn't get to where I wanted to be. But I got the impression actually that a zero moment of truth is actually just the beginning.
Yeah,
and you want to keep that circle going.
Yeah, exactly. It's about trying to control as much as possible what people... The reason we mention it and the reason it becomes important is because that's why search exists and why social search exists. And it's about putting the effort in to make sure that you're not just putting a campaign out there or putting an advert out there or doing whatever and then just expecting people to go and buy tickets, and about focus on how that might appear and actually trying it out. I mean, I'm quite sure the film Patterson had a fairly significant marketing budget. But, you know, equally, I think it... No, they didn't think about Google.
Well, they
didn't
probably
think Google.
did.
And that's the thing. I mean, with really great thing again, Google's Digital Garage is a free indoctrination, but it is really useful. And so that's really the key point of it. And if you map out your journeys and make sure you're considering that in them, it's a good thing to do. Anything else? Yes.
As you brought up Donald Trump, I was thinking we're living in an age now where we can't really trust statistics. because of all the stuff that happened this year, of all the polls being really dramatically wrong in lots of situations. So when confronted with that, actually, how do you build your own trust and leverage that? Because I just, and some of the things you said, like, in terms of politics, defending it just as sort of a scale left or right is not how most people would necessarily judge it. And so I'm really just wary of getting too much data basing on that when you're actually, going down a dark alley.
No, there's a point at which common sense has got to kick in. I mean, in all honesty, it was a fun example, but, if someone does like Donald Trump, do you need them as a customer? But I think the way to look at it is measure your data sources. So most of the tools you'll find online which are free are there to lead you up a garden path and get you to then commit to them, yeah? So, but if you're using any kind of a CRM, that's a more accurate reflection of who you're serving than any outside data source. So you have to use it advisedly and take a mix of the two. The problem is know where to draw the line. In terms of polling, I would trust data over polls, absolutely. But there was all sorts of chat about with Brexit. Google had a last-minute kind of shift and said, Brexit's going to happen. So there's lies, damn lies, and then there's Google Analytics, and you've got to just know where to draw the line. There's not a right or wrong answer. Hi there. There's a question just here.
Yes, a couple of, first of all, Patterson's funded by Amazon, so that's something noteworthy. I think there are some interesting data-led questionnaires done by professors that did predict Trump to vote, and they were doing it on people's beliefs. And that's the difference, is a lot of these analytics are about people's beliefs rather than just saying what I'm going to vote, because the issues with polls were that people might not want to report that they would vote for Trump because the person on the other end of the line might be Latino or sound foreign to them or whatever. They might not actually tell the truth. So that's one of the issues about polling. I guess the question is, I am aware in this room we've probably got a lot of people that are chatting about trying to get new audiences in because that's part of their remit as a charity or council service. Do you have anything to sort of talk about that? Because some of those things in loyalty were about the audiences you already have, and you've got to preserve those, and they are really important. But what about new audiences?
Very, very quickly, just before we go there, the whole Trump thing as well, is like, or Brexit. How many people didn't wake up that morning and go, "Oh my God, it happened"? And it's like that's a liberal echo chamber that is social media for you. So careful where you base your beliefs again. And on funders, I still tell a little bit.
Can I just say that's one way of looking at it, but also it was a shocking result. It was the result that a lot of people didn't want.
Yeah.
The liberal echo chamber is a wee bit of an assumption. I can go on Facebook and I can look at all sorts of mad right-wing stuff.
You can, but don't forget, it's things.
Much more easy.
Yeah. So search is contextual. Social is contextual. So your experiences are designed around you and around your preferences. So the days when, I remember the early days, Facebook 2007, I was served. Yeah, but I was served for an advert for example, a 4x4 all-terrain wheelchair in 2008 by Facebook. That wouldn't happen now. But absolutely right, you can't make assumptions about it, I get that. But there's some really interesting debate about it online actually, about how we act as influencers based on belief and how important that is. And it's the same thing as trying to find someone who votes for a particular political party when nobody confesses to do it, but suddenly they get votes. So yeah, there are lots of debate around it, but I would say that when you're in any walled garden, as you would call them in a digital sense, I think you have to exercise some caution about the results that you get, what the things you're seeing and how they're putting around you.
So, and I'll just jump in to answer your question, which is a really great point, which is the question of, okay, we already have these audiences, but if we want to grow our audiences, if we want to have more people coming along, what do you do? And so one of the things that we would advise and that you could start by doing is using the data that you have from your current audiences and doing a bit of profiling and getting a sense of who they are. And then once you have that sense of who they are, then it's not an unreasonable leap to think, well, maybe there are other people who are like these people, but who are not my current audiences. What are the motivators for those people to come? how can I reach out to that group who are like my current group? I know they like what I'm offering them. In the example, that final example that I gave you, now I'm trying to remember one of the things that was considered was a kind of how to use a loyalty scheme to bring new people in, right? So, which is slightly counterintuitive, but offering incentives for people to bring a friend along, and especially to bring a friend along to some of the more challenging programming. So to get people to try something new, to get people through the door, not for just the kind of more blockbuster stuff or the stuff that's going to get a lot of attention, but also once they've built that relationship with you, once you have a sense of what their patterns are and you have a sense of who they are and what motivates them, and of course, and the crucial thing is it's not a solid block. So it's who are the slices and what are the different motivators, and then finding a way to offer something or reach that person in the moment that's going to connect with them. Yeah. And so you can only do that based on what you know, and you'll know your audiences best, and you'll have access to your own data. And so you can, we can talk about this generally, but yeah.
We've actually just run out of time. Guys,
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time today. We're going to be here for the next 15 minutes or so. Yeah. Love the debate around things as well. There's lots of chat to have, so please come and speak to us, or alternatively, we'll see you around. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers.